the furnace where attention is tempered. Focus is usually treated like a talent. Some people have it. Others chase it. That belief is convenient, and it keeps the failure private. The room is quiet, but the body isn't. Shoulders tighten. Jaw locks. Breath shortens as the phone lights up again. Someone nearby laughs at how serious you look. You tell yourself you'll start tomorrow, and the heat drains out of the moment. Most attempts begin with intensity and end with negotiation. The first week is loud. The second is stiff fingers and heavy eyelids. By the third, the belt stays on the hook because no one is watching. Friends ask why you're suddenly rigid, why you won't bend plans for a drink. You smile, then bend anyway, and the smile costs more than it should. Japanese warriors learned early that attention breaks where choice remains. In cold halls, knees folded to the mat without ceremony. Breath counted even when the mind resisted. Hands wrapped the sword handle the same way, again. Not because they felt ready, but because readiness was irrelevant. Figures like Miyamoto Musashi trained until the body moved before consent, until heat behind the eyes settled into a steady pulse, and the room stopped arguing back. This wasn't willpower. It was a forge. Repetition stripped excuses. Social friction sharpened resolve. The floor stayed cold. They knelt anyway. Focus hardened because there was nowhere else for it to go, and that pressure changes who you are. Before you continue, comment the habit you keep negotiating with. One sentence. No explanation, when awareness arrives before the excuse. He looks ordinary from the outside. Sharp plans. Clean notebook. Shoes by the door. The first morning, he stands anyway. Cold air fills the lungs. Ankles ache as weight settles. The house is quiet except for the hum of a refrigerator. He checks the time twice, as if it might change its mind, and someone later asks why he's up so early. He shrugs, but the question sticks to the ribs and follows him into the dark. By the fourth day, the body knows the hour. Heavy eyelids lift without debate. Fingers are stiff tying laces. The floor is cold under bare feet. He moves before the mind drafts its speech. A friend messages a joke about being too serious. He reads it, exhales through the nose, and keeps moving. The joke lands anyway, a small social tax paid in silence, and the door closes behind him with a soft accusation. The moment doesn't arrive as clarity. It arrives as friction. Breath shortened on the first steps. Heat blooms behind the eyes. Shoulders tighten, then loosen. He notices the same corner every morning, the same streetlight flicker, the same ache returning to the calves. People pass and glance back because the routine is visible now, predictable, faintly unsettling. He feels watched and continues, which costs more than quitting would. There is a shift when effort stops being the story. The body begins to expect the hour the way it expects hunger. Knees bend without ceremony. Hands repeat the same grip. Pulse steadies. The mind protests late, like a neighbor complaining after the work is already done. Later, at work, someone asks why he won't stay late. He says nothing. The silence creates space, and space creates pressure that doesn't need defending. He recognizes himself not by success, but by refusal to bargain. When rain comes, the route changes without thought. When fatigue appears, pace drops, not presence. On days he's sick, he steps out briefly, breath fogging, then returns. The chain stays unbroken. Others notice the predictability and test it. Invitations soften. Teasing sharpens. He feels it in the jaw and keeps the hour. This is the awakening most people miss. Not inspiration, but recognition. The body moving before permission. The room learning it can't negotiate with you. And once that begins, the next pressure reveals itself, where identity replaces effort without ceremony. The hall is older than the argument. Wood darkened by hands that never asked permission. He kneels because the mat is there. Knees fold. Ankles complain. The air is cool against the throat. No one corrects him. No one encourages him. A cough echoes somewhere behind, a reminder that others are watching and not intervening. The absence of instruction is the instruction, and it presses on the spine. In these places, attention is not summoned. It is assumed. A monk rises before the bell because the bell is late to the body. Fingers wrap the cup the same way. Steam fogs the eyes. Breath counts return when the mind wanders, not as punishment, but as gravity. Someone new shifts too much and earns a glance that lands like weight. The room doesn't shame him. It simply continues, and the continuation exposes the gap. Warriors carried this principle beyond the hall. Training began at the hour, not the feeling. Rain fell. Sand stuck to the calves. The grip stayed the same. Hands learned the handle until skin thickened and complaints dulled. A senior passed by and said nothing, which said enough. The body absorbed the rule, this is who you are here. Outside, people laughed at the rigidity, called it excessive, and those words scraped, but they also clarified the boundary. The ancient rule was quiet and severe. Identity precedes mood. Practice follows identity. There is no vote each morning. The belt is tied before bargaining starts. The floor is cold, you kneel anyway. When the mind lags, the body carries it forward like a younger brother who talks too much. Others notice the lack of drama and misread it as ease. It isn't ease. It's removal. Removal changes the social weather. Invitations soften because you won't bend. Jokes sharpen because predictability unnerves. You feel it in the jaw, the tight smile, the pause before replying. Then the pause becomes normal. The room learns the schedule as a fact, like the tide. Resistance fades not because you win, but because there is nothing left to argue with. This principle doesn't announce itself as wisdom. It announces itself as repetition that survives bad days. A fever comes, you sit briefly. An injury appears, the movement slows. Continuity remains. The chain matters more than the shine. Once this settles into the bones, a new conflict surfaces, closer and louder than weather or jokes, the quiet battle that ruins most mornings. The conflict starts before the eyes open. The body is warm. Sheets hold the heat. Breath is slow and heavy. Then the thought arrives, casual and practiced. Just today. The clock glows. Shoulders sink. A message from yesterday echoes. Someone joked about being extreme, about missing out. The joke waits in the chest, and the body hesitates long enough for negotiation to smell possible. He sits up anyway. Feet touch the floor. Cold bites the arches. The room feels larger than it should. The mind speeds up to catch the body, throwing reasons like gravel. You trained hard yesterday. You barely slept. No one will know. The jaw tightens. A neighbor's door closes down the hall. Someone else is already moving, and that sound adds weight to the choice he didn't want to make. This is where most mornings collapse. Not in weakness, but in conversation. The belt stays untied while the argument gains confidence. Breath shortens. Heat builds behind the eyes. The phone lights up with an invitation for later, proof that bending would feel social and safe. He stands there, half-dressed, feeling watched by no one and judged by everyone he imagines. The longer it lasts, the louder it gets. When he moves, it isn't heroic. It's abrupt. Hands tie the belt mid-thought. Shoes go on unevenly. The body interrupts the debate like a door slammed shut. Outside, the air is sharp. Lungs sting. Legs feel dull and resistant. The mind keeps talking for a few minutes, offended at being ignored. A passerby glances at the tension in his shoulders and looks away. That glance lands as a question he doesn't answer. The war isn't dramatic. It repeats. Every morning, the same scripts, the same bargains offered with new packaging. Rain adds a clause. Fatigue adds another. Each time he listens, the negotiation grows stronger the next day. Each time he doesn't, the voice returns thinner, annoyed, less convincing. Friends notice the change before he names it. They comment on the silence, the way he leaves early, the way he no longer explains. Their reactions test the fault lines, and the body feels them as tightness before words form. This battle never ends. It either becomes routine or it becomes rule. Most people lose here because they keep believing the argument deserves airtime. What comes next depends on whether choice remains in the room, where choice is removed and focus survives. The structure is simple enough to offend people. The hour does not move. The action does not change. He wakes and the body already knows where to go. Cold air hits the lungs. The floor is cold, he steps anyway. There is no question to answer, and the absence of a question feels like pressure on the chest. Someone once told him this was extreme. The comment returns sometimes, and he tightens his jaw and keeps the hour. Choice is where focus leaks. He learned that the slow way. On days he decided, the decision drained him before the work began. On days the decision was already gone, the work arrived intact. Shoes were laid out the night before. The belt waited on the chair. Hands moved through the same order. The mind protested late and weak, like a witness who missed the event. Outside, a neighbor waved and asked why he never switches it up. He nodded and passed, leaving the question behind like weight dropped on the curb. The rule was narrow. Fixed time. Fixed action. No negotiation. When rain fell, the route changed without ceremony. When exhaustion appeared, pace dropped, not presence. The system bent without breaking, and that flexibility confused people who expected drama. They watched for excuses and found none. That absence unsettled them more than defiance would have. He felt it in the shoulders when invitations arrived late, already assuming his answer. The body adapted first. Breath found a rhythm. Pulse steadied sooner. Heat behind the eyes came and went without comment. The mind followed, irritated at being redundant. At work, he declined meetings that crossed the hour. The silence afterward stretched. Someone joked about priorities. He didn't correct them. The correction was the routine itself, visible and inconvenient. This way is not broad. It does not scale well to explanation. It works because it is small and absolute. When the chain stays intact, even in reduced form, the system protects focus like a wall. When the chain breaks, focus bleeds out fast. He learned to protect the link, not the outcome. On sick days, he stepped outside briefly and returned. On injured days, movement slowed. Continuity remained, and that continuity carried authority. Once choice leaves the room, something else enters. Gaps reveal themselves. Not in performance, but in presence. What happens next depends on whether those gaps are allowed to form, where continuity matters more than intensity. Gaps don't announce themselves as failures. They arrive dressed as reasonable pauses. The body wakes with a dull ache in the legs. Throat scratchy. Breath shallow. He tells himself it would be smarter to rest properly. The floor is cold. He stands there longer than usual. Later, someone at work nods approvingly when he mentions taking a day off. The approval feels warm and dangerous. He learned to fear the gap more than the strain. When the chain breaks, restarting costs more than continuing ever did. So he keeps it small. On bad days, he shortens the distance. Knees bend slowly. Ankles complain. Breath fogs the air for a minute outside, then he turns back. A passerby watches, confused, as if expecting more. The confusion is the point. The chain stays intact, and the body remembers the hour. There is no heroism in this. The movements are quieter. Practice thins without disappearing. Hands repeat the grip with less force. Pulse rises modestly, then settles. Heat behind the eyes fades quicker. The mind tries to call it pointless. He doesn't answer. At home, someone asks why he bothered if it was so short. The question presses on the ribs. He rinses a cup, dries it, says nothing, and the silence carries forward. Continuity reshapes time. Days stop feeling like isolated tests. They become links. When illness comes, he sits briefly. Back straight. Breath counted until the cough interrupts. The interruption is noted, not argued with. When injury limits movement, he practices what remains. Footwork without speed. Grip without power. Others suggest stopping entirely. They mean well. He feels their concern as a tightening in the jaw and continues smaller. The body begins to trust this pattern. It expects presence, not performance. Heavy eyelids lift more easily because they know the demand is modest and absolute. The mind loses leverage when perfection is removed. Social friction increases in subtle ways. Invitations come with disclaimers. Jokes sharpen about being obsessive. He feels the heat in the face and lets it pass. The routine answers better than explanations. This is where most people break the chain by accident. They wait for conditions to improve. They wait to feel worthy of returning. Days slip. The hour forgets them. He refuses that erosion by touching the practice daily, even lightly. The touch is enough. It keeps the door open so the body can walk through without knocking. Continuity doesn't look impressive. It looks stubborn and small. But it builds a surface that resists erosion. When pressure increases later, that surface matters. The unseen obstacles don't arrive gently, and gaps give them room to enter, where obstacles are answered before they appear. The trouble rarely comes as surprise. It comes as timing. Rain starts halfway through tying shoes. A meeting runs long. A fever hums behind the eyes by afternoon. Each one arrives with a question attached, and the body feels the question first as tightness in the throat. People wait to see what you'll do. They always do. He learned to answer earlier. Not in the moment, but before it. When rain falls, training moves indoors without thought. When exhaustion appears, intensity drops and the hour stays. When the schedule breaks, the next available slot is used immediately, even if it's imperfect. These responses live in the body now, like reflexes. The mind finds out after the fact and pretends it agreed. A coworker raises an eyebrow when he leaves mid-conversation. The eyebrow lingers. He feels it between the shoulders and keeps walking. Predecisions remove panic. Shoes are laid out at night. The belt rests on the chair. The route has alternates memorized. When the phone lights up with a last-minute invitation, the answer is already known. The chest tightens anyway. Social cost always arrives before relief. He absorbs it in silence. Later, someone says he's hard to read. He rinses his hands under cold water and lets the comment slide off with it. Unseen obstacles are rarely dramatic. They are small frictions that multiply. A late night becomes two. A skipped hour asks for another. He counters them with smaller moves. On days the body resists, he shows up briefly. Breath counts. Knees bend. Ankles ache. Then he leaves. The chain holds. People notice the predictability and stop testing it as often. The testing doesn't vanish, it thins. There's a moment when others try to rescue you from your own system. They suggest flexibility. Balance. A break you didn't ask for. Their concern lands as warmth mixed with pressure. He feels it behind the sternum. He thanks them and declines. The decline is quiet, which makes it heavier. Quiet refusals change rooms. Conversations shift. Invitations adjust their language. The body senses the change before the mind names it. Pre-solutions don't make life easier. They make it narrower. That narrowness protects focus when stress spikes. When illness hits hard, he sits for a minute and stands. When injury limits movement, he practices what remains. No drama. No story. The responses are already installed, and installation took longer than execution ever will. This is how discipline survives contact with reality. Not by winning arguments, but by preventing them. And once the arguments stop arriving, a different change begins to show itself, when the body moves before permission. The change is first noticed by others. He arrives at the same hour without checking the clock. Shoulders settle faster. Breath finds its lane. Hands repeat the motion without looking. Someone nearby comments on the calm, half joking, half wary. He feels the comment as warmth behind the ears and keeps moving. The room adjusts around him, not the other way around. Inside, the shift is quieter. The mind still speaks, but later. The body stands before the thought finishes forming. Heavy eyelids lift without resentment. The floor is cold, feet step anyway. Pulse steadies sooner. Heat behind the eyes rises and falls without story. On days the schedule collapses, the body reaches for the nearest slot instinctively. There is no pride in it. Pride would slow the response. Social friction sharpens as predictability hardens. Friends stop asking if he'll come last minute. Jokes about being rigid turn into assumptions. At work, meetings are scheduled around the hour without discussion. Someone tests the boundary once, smiling, expecting flexibility. He declines without explanation. The smile fades a fraction. He feels it in the jaw and lets the feeling pass through without chasing it. The practice stops feeling like a practice. It becomes background noise, like weather that no longer needs checking. When illness hits, he shows up briefly. Breath counts. Back straightens. Then he leaves. When injury limits movement, he repeats what remains. The repetition is smaller, but it lands deeper. The body trusts that presence will be required and provided. Trust changes posture. This trust alters how pressure is met. Stress no longer scatters attention. It compresses it. The room grows loud, he grows quieter. Others notice the contrast and comment on it. The comments arrive as curiosity mixed with unease. He absorbs them in the chest and continues. The absence of explanation does more work than defense ever did. Transformation isn't a feeling of power. It's the disappearance of debate. The hours stop asking for permission. The body moves before consent, and the mind follows like a late clerk stamping forms that no longer matter. What once required effort now feels wrong to skip. Not heroic. Just incorrect. People often mistake this for strength. It isn't. It's alignment hardened by repetition and protected by refusal to negotiate. Once this settles, the final question appears, heavier than all the others. Not how to act, but who you are now expected to be, when identity closes the argument for good. Discipline stops being an activity and settles into posture. He stands differently now. Weight balanced. Jaw relaxed. Breath low and even. The hour arrives and the body answers before language forms. Skipping feels wrong in the way stepping into traffic feels wrong. Not dramatic. Incorrect. Others sense it and adjust, sometimes with relief, sometimes with irritation that never quite finds a target. This is not strength. Strength still fluctuates. Sleep breaks. Illness visits. Mood drifts. What remains is narrower and heavier. The refusal to negotiate. The quiet certainty that the next action has already been taken. The body learned the rule through repetition and kept it when the mind wavered. That learning shows up as calm under pressure and silence under testing, and both make rooms uneasy. People will name it discipline because they need a word. The word misses the point. This is identity hardened by continuity. You no longer decide to show up. You notice when you haven't yet. The difference matters. It moves stress from the center to the edges. It turns chaos into compression. It costs social comfort and buys internal coherence, and that trade doesn't announce itself as a victory. The unshakable person is not the most driven. It's the one who removed the daily vote. When excuses arrive, they find no chair. When praise comes, it passes through without sticking. What remains is a rhythm that doesn't care who's watching. If this exposed something you've been bargaining with, lock it publicly. Comment your commitment in one sentence. No explanation. No context. Just the action.